So what does a producer actually do? For this video, we're mainly going to be talking about a film producer and what they do every step of the way. If we think of filmmaking like a football team, you can think of the producer like the coach, and you can think of the director, for example, as the quarterback. That's a good way of seeing it. So as the coach or as the producer, you're responsible for every part of the production, at least if you're the lead producer. There's obviously a lot of different producers. There's an executive producer, associate producer, executive. There's all kinds of producers. There's even under the term just producer, it could be the lead producer who's involved with every step of the way, or maybe it's the producer that's only involved during production or only in post-production. It's not always clear, at least from IMDb, what their role was. One good way when you do see it to know if how involved they were is if the movie under the credits it says produced by, then you know that person was likely the lead producer and was probably involved from the beginning all the way till the end. For this video, we're going to be talking mainly about the lead producer. Because the lead producer is involved usually from the script phase all the way to distribution phase, that's why producers usually get paid the most out of anyone. But, you know, obviously in indie filmmaking, that's not always the case. Very different there. But in studios, you can assume that usually the producer is the one making the most money. But in indie filmmaking, that's not always the case. There's definitely cases in indie filmmaking where they make very little money because maybe they take almost no money because they're hoping that the movie makes a net profit. So then if it doesn't make a net profit, they don't really make much of any money because maybe they try to save all the money to spend it all in the movie, which in indie filmmaking is a good idea because you have a super limited budget. But it's risky for the producer if for sure. So that's why indie filmmaking is very different and is risky for the producer especially because you could spend a long time, especially if you're involved from the script phase all the way to distribution, which that whole thing can take 1.5 to 2 years easily, for maybe you're not making that much money off it. So that's something to keep in mind. But, you know, hopefully if you're in filmmaking, you're not only doing it for the money because, as we know, it's a very up and down industry. And I think you have to love making movies and you have to love movies to want to do this, which I do. So let's start with the development stage of a movie. So this would be when you're finding a script or you're developing a script. So as a producer, you might find a script. So you might find a script somewhere or someone sent it to you, a writer sent it to you, and you really like the script, so you option it. You basically own it for a set amount of time, whatever the contract says or whatever you guys negotiate. That would be one way that the producer is involved with that. Or maybe you commission a writer to write a script based on an idea that you and a director have, or you and another producer, and you commission a writer to write the script for you. That's also a possibility. And of course, it's also possible that maybe you wrote the script and you're also going to produce it. So what we did is we optioned the script from a writer, and it was a script we really love, and we reached out to the writer, set up a meeting, took couple meetings actually, and then from there we optioned her script for, in our case, 2 years. And now we are basically in the stage of attaching a director, and then we're going to go attach more of the key cast and then move on to fully funding it and everything else that comes after that. So once you have your script, whichever way that you did that, then you'll likely want to attach. So you'll either want to attach cast first or attach a director. Usually I'd say attach a director because everything kind of flows from there. A director obviously has the biggest influence on what the movie turns into. So this is your most important hire. So definitely something you want to take your time with, and definitely something that you want to feel 100% whoever you take, that this is the person that is on the same page as you, that has the same vision as you. So this is someone you should definitely interview a couple times if it's cold, or if it's someone that you know. That's easier, I guess, in that way because you trust them already and you know their taste and their vision potentially. But it's definitely something you should take your time with and think about, because you're also going to be working with this person for a long time. It might be 1.5 to 2 years that you're working with this person. That's a long time to work with someone you don't like if you make the wrong hire. So just take your time on that and really make sure it's someone that's on the same page as you. So let's say then you attach your director. So you have your script, you have your director. Now you would probably move on to cast. Like, it's not necessary that you have to do it all this order. There's different ways to do it. Everyone can do it a different way. I think for indie filmmaking, this is a good way to go. I mean, sometimes people get funding first and then attach everything else. But I think if you're trying to raise money, I think it's better to have a package, have a director, have hopefully a key name as cast that makes your movie more sellable and more attractive to investors, and hopefully for pre-sales as well. So once you have your director, you would maybe go out to find at least one key cast member, maybe 2 or 3. So let's say your lead is probably what you would go after first. So you would go out and make a list of, together with the director of course, and together with the director you guys would collaborate and make a list of, let's say, who you would want as the lead for the movie. And once you have that list, maybe you have 10 actors on there ranked from 1 to 10 and kind of who you want the most, all the way down. So then if you want to attach them, there's different ways to go about it. If you're brand new, you'd probably go to IMDb and you'd find these actors and see who they're repped by, who's their talent agent, who's their talent manager, and then you would reach out to this talent manager, talent agent with the script and with the director that you have attached, and that you want to offer them to role and have them read the script. And then if they like the script, maybe you get them attached then, and then you'd obviously first negotiate what their price would be, how much they're asking. Usually you make an offer, and because, let's say in this case, you don't have the money yet, what you're really doing is you're just getting them attached. So all this means is that usually you will sign a contract with them, well, through their agent, for a certain amount of time. Most of the time it's a year that they do this. So you'll sign a contract that you have a year to basically get the movie made, and for a year you have a contract with them. So a letter of intent, it's called. And so if you do that, then you basically can use their name to basically go out to investors, market the movie to find funding. That's the big advantage, and they know that too, that you're going to do that. That's part of the deal. So they know that, and you need that in terms of getting investors on board, especially if you want a big name actor, which obviously helps a lot in raising money. That's why with attaching talent, that's why I recommend getting a good director on board first if you don't have that yet, because the director's name or work experience or whatever they've done will attract the type of talent that you likely want for the movie. That's a huge draw factor for an actor and for the team as well. Outside of money, the most important is the script and the director, because if the script's good and the role's good, that already gets them interested because it's something they want to play. And then the director is huge because then they know that this script will be executed properly, or at least has a high chance of being executed properly. So that's why both of those factors are 2 that you really have to have in order, or have to be really good, and then you have a chance of attracting this name talent. Now, that's not the only way to do it. This is going through direct offer, what I've been talking about. You could also hire a casting director, and then they'll do it for you, and they might have better connections than you cold emailing. Or you would actually cast. That's also a possibility. So you could cast for the lead role, let's say, and then you would actually hold auditions and choose who you think is best for the role together with the director. That's also really common. A lot of times for indie filmmaking, when you do that, you're probably not going to go for big names, especially if you have, let's say, a sub $1 million budget. Like if you're casting, a lot of the bigger names that you would offer directly to probably aren't going to audition for that movie for under $1 million. So just keep that in mind. If you're under that, like, your best chance is to offer the role and to offer it for a certain amount. And what that amount is, that's where negotiation comes into play. You don't want to go too low that it's insulting and that they just don't even look at it or they dismiss it. But you can't go too high either, because you don't want to blow most of your budget and then struggle to finish the movie. So this is something that you have to really think about and see what's the fair offer to make, but also what's the most you can afford, or if you know what their number has been, then what's the number that you need to get close to. Something that also happens in indie filmmaking that's pretty common for these smaller budget movies, or even a little bit bigger, but it's just Schedule F. And that covers, you can go up to a pretty big budget movie with that, because if the script's amazing and the director's amazing, a lot of people will take that. But Schedule F is usually, I think it's up to $75,000 now. I know that number recently changed this past year, but I believe it's 75 now. So that's a good starting starting point in terms of knowing that at that number you'll probably be able to attract good actors, especially if you have a good script and a good director. But again, if you don't have the money, but you do have an amazing director and you have an amazing script, you can negotiate for lower, you can offer lower. The worst that can happen is that they say no, or they're usually just going to push back and negotiate if they're interested. So let's say you could also go lower and offer that, or you could do a combination. You could do a certain number. Let's say you offer 30K plus some back-end points, which is where they get money depending how much the movie sells for, and that can be net or gross profit. Again, something that's negotiable, something that you have to figure out what you're comfortable with, and then also figure out what they're willing to do and accept and what they want. So there's a lot of back and forth with that, but just keep that in mind. Obviously, you have to come up with something that works for your movie, but that helps you attract the highest level of talent. So once you have that, so maybe you have a director, you have the script, you have key talent, maybe you have one attached to the lead, maybe you have 2 or 3 attached, just depends on the movie and what you can do. Once you have that, you're really going to start focusing on funding. And hopefully you've been doing that a little bit already, at least putting some feelers out there. But now you should aggressively start going after funding because you have your full package. You have your key elements. So this is when you would really put your package together into a pitch. You'd have your lookbook, you'd have your investor deck. These are separate videos, and I'll make videos about this, but because it's also pretty long to explain and every element of that. But that's what you would go out with, and then try to get private equity, for example. That's one way. Or maybe you would go to productions and see if someone will co-produce the movie with you by putting in money. If you do that, likely you're going to lose some creative control. Maybe not, but like usually they're going to want something. Very few production companies you're going to get that are just like, here's my money and you have creative control. Especially if you're fairly new, no one's going to do that usually. But that's one way to do it. You could do private funding as well, and that's obviously creatively you can maintain more control, but obviously a harder road because usually you're not going to find necessarily just one investor. You're going to have multiple investors, and hopefully that leads to your full budget or whatever your minimum is that you really need. There's also crowdfunding, of course. A lot of people have done that. There's equity crowdfunding. So there's a lot of different ways to raise the money, and then there's also pre-sales, minimum guarantees, basically where you go to distributors, you go to sales agent with your full package, with your script. They take a look at the full package with the attachments, director and all that. And then they see if they would be willing to give you a minimum guarantee, which means that they're saying like, I don't know, let's say one distributor, and you can do this per country as well. It can be a distributor that covers the whole world, so worldwide rights, or it can be one that isn't just in one territory, like Australia, and then you have your United States one. I think that just depends what offer you get. You know what I mean? I would definitely look at both options and see where your best numbers come from. But maybe they say, oh, well, we're willing to do a minimum guarantee of 200,000 or something. So maybe someone says that, right? So then you know, okay, if I complete the movie, this is what I'm guaranteed already. You know, that's my minimum. So if you have that, that helps you because that not only does that help you with investors, because you can show them like, hey, even if you're investing X amount, you're already getting this amount back the moment we finish and basically deliver the movie. But even if you have no investors, this can still help you because if you have a minimum guarantee, they're usually not going to give you the money up front. Sometimes they do a little bit. They're not going to give you usually the full amount. That rarely happens. They usually going to do it on delivery. But what you can do is you are able to get a loan based on that minimum guarantee, especially if that minimum guarantee is with a reputable company, which is really important. And if you have that, then they'd be willing to give you a loan, usually 70-80% of the value of that minimum guarantee. So in terms of, let's say you have 200,000 minimum guarantee, to keep the numbers really easy, then let's say 70%, maybe they'll loan you 140K for a certain amount of time. And then you'll pay that back as soon as you deliver the movie and they pay you for the movie. So that's one way to make your movie as well. So there's different ways to get it done. And obviously if you're an indie filmmaker early on, like you want to use all the options. You want to go through that. You also want to look at grants that countries have, that states have. You want to look at tax incentives, rebates. And all this I'll go into in a separate video about distribution because there's so much to talk about there. But it just shows that there's different ways to get your funding together. And that's why a producer is an intensive job. It's a full-time job because you're doing all this and you're still right now at max in pre-production. you haven't even shot the movie yet and you're doing all this already. So very important, and that's why I think producers are so, not only are they essential, I think in many ways, especially for indie film, they're the most important because they're the ones that actually put it all together and make it happen, because it's hard to even just get the money together. So that's something to keep in mind. Oh, and one more thing about minimum guarantees. Keep in mind that the genre also matters in that. Let's say dramas are a lot harder to get minimum guarantees, and for example, horror is usually easier. So genre matters, just keep that in mind. Horror is usually the easiest one out of those. The hardest is maybe drama or maybe sci-fi. It depends, but just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean you have to choose a genre just based on that, but it's something to keep in mind in your decision making and what you're going to do moving forward. Now, once you've done all that, so now you have all these positions, you actually raised all the funding. That's great. You've done some of the hardest work already, and you've gotten further than most people ever get, because the funding is usually what stops everyone. So you've gotten to a great position. You got everything together. So now you got to finish hiring the rest of the positions. So that means director of photography, the makeup department, art department, every position in the movie, you're basically going to have input in and also have final say in a lot of ways in hiring. Of course, like the director will have a huge input there, especially for the camera team. That's usually more the director that will choose who he's comfortable with. But look, you're signing off on that and you're negotiating that as well, because in terms of price and how much they're getting paid per day, and again, it needs to fit in your budget. So, just be smart about that and make sure that you've created a budget. That's why, honestly, sometimes it's a good idea to, the first position to hire is probably line producer or AD, first AD. Someone that can put together your schedule so you know how many days you have to shoot. And then once you know that, and also having them put together a budget, or at least an approximate budget, so that you know what's your minimum. And that's something you want to know early on. So ideally you already get someone on board before you raise money, because you need to know your budget when you're going out to investors. And again, you don't have to necessarily hire someone full time already to be on the movie. There are people that will actually make a budget as a service. So if you want to do that, you can also do that. Just have someone create the budget. But you're definitely going to need that because you need to know your minimum. And ideally you have different budget points. You have this is my minimum to make this movie, this is my normal budget, and this is my best case scenario budget. So that you know, like, okay, well, in this budget I can't get probably name actors, but in this budget I'm going for one big name actor. So that's all stuff to keep in mind. And also, as a producer, is something that you're pretty much doing all the time, is figuring out how to make things work within the budget. So once you have everyone that you need, and of course, don't forget your locations. Hopefully you've also locked in your locations. Maybe you have a location manager or a location scout or someone that does that on your team. As an indie filmmaker, maybe you don't, you know what I mean? Maybe that's you as well. So you're locking down the locations, negotiating with them, and I'll make a video about that too. There's definitely ways to get that cheaper than most people do it, because most people, when they do it, they just pay the normal rates. You can make deals and get things done cheaper, or sometimes even for free. So that's important to keep in mind. So as a producer, that's a huge part of your job, is figuring out how do I get costs down while keeping the level of everything high and the quality high, so it's still the best movie. So it involves a lot of negotiation. So that's, if I'm thinking of skills required, I think negotiation is one of the top skills that you're going to need. And then once we've done all that, you've already done a lot, but now we're in production, and when you're on set, you're still in problem-solving mode in a lot of ways. You're helping the director, you're helping the whole team. You're making sure, as well as everyone else, of course, and the director, but you're also making sure that everything that you guys talked about stays on schedule, on point, basically, that we're following the story that we agreed to make. And you're basically facilitating, you're problem-solving. Maybe a location falls through, so you need to figure out, okay, how do we replace this location? Maybe something breaks, how do we replace this quickly? Maybe it's raining and we need to change the order of the scenes. So there's a lot of things that can happen and will happen. So just keep that in mind. So once you enter the production phase, those days are hectic because you're problem solving the whole movie through, and they can be long days. So just keep that in mind. So in terms of skill set, if we're adding on to what I said earlier, with negotiation being a top skill, the other one is problem solving. I think negotiation and problem solving, those two are just the main skills to have. If you've gotten through all this, you're doing great. and then now you're going into post-production. So you're gonna edit the movie, the director is usually very involved with that, but you also have say in that unless you fully gave final cut to director, which means that creatively they have the final say in what the movie turns into in editing. You probably wouldn't do that unless you're working with an established director. So you're probably gonna be involved in this. So you wanna make sure that, you know, the right takes are being chosen, that the story is being told in the way that you guys want it to be told. So you're just kind of overseeing that again. So you're kind of managing that as well. So keep that in mind. That also takes time. But like I think this is also really fun because now you're actually seeing the product and the end result, or at least pieces of the end result of what all the work you just put in. So you're seeing what it's turning into. So this is a really fun and exciting part. And this will also show you what you have. Once you start getting to editing, you're going to see what type of movie you have. Sometimes when you're shooting it, things are so hectic and there's so much going on that it's hard to know if you have everything. Like, would you need reshoots? Did you get everything? Did you get all the coverage you needed? You're gonna find all this out usually in editing, especially, and you're gonna start seeing what kind of movie you made. Because in theory, like, it's all good with the script and you're like, oh, this is gonna be an amazing movie. Pre-production, oh, it's gonna be amazing. I hired the right people. Production, all these shots are beautiful. The performances are beautiful. But then you still don't know. Hopefully, yes, but you still don't know until the edit. The edit is super important because you're making the movie again. The movie can either get screwed up there with a bad edit, or sometimes when maybe the production wasn't that good, but you got enough good stuff, you can actually save the movie in editing. So again, editor, really, really key position. Make sure you have the best person there that you can get for your budget, because this can make or break the movie. Once you guys have done that, and once you guys have picture locked, which means you have the final version of the movie with everything, editing, sound, everything that you need. Now you get into distribution and the marketing, which is, you know, it's just a whole huge thing as well. It's as big as the whole pre-production phase, I would say, if you're doing it right. Because as an indie filmmaker, like, it's not like a studio you're just handing it off to Warner Brothers and they're just handling it all for you. More than likely, you're gonna have to be pretty involved if you want to make sure the movie gets widely seen. And this is where I think a lot of filmmakers kind of take their foot off the pedal, and which makes sense. Like, at this point, you're probably pretty tired and you've done all this heavy lifting to do what's really hard to do, and you completed a movie. But now, like, you have to keep going and you have to spend as much time on this. What you don't want is, you don't want this movie that everyone puts so much energy, money, and time in, and then not get it seen by as many people as possible and not get the best deal that you can possibly get. And this is really important for the producer to be super involved in, because there's plenty of stories with a good movie with bad distribution that barely gets seen, or bad deal where no one made money. So keep this in mind. This is really important for you to be on top of. And when you go out, you might go to a festival run first, right? So you'll enter the best festivals and see, hopefully, the best festival that you get into. Maybe you get a distribution deal at one of the festivals that someone sees it there. Maybe, maybe not. Even if you don't, then your next step after the festival is to go to distributors. And then you're gonna see what the feedback is and what you're getting. Maybe you get a great deal or a couple of great deals and you can choose which deal you want to take. That's ideal scenario. Maybe they give you the best deals and they're going to give you a cinema release and you have everything that you want. Great, that makes your job a lot easier. But, you know, more than likely it's not going to be exactly what you want. You know what I mean? It's going to be things missing. But maybe you do get a distributor that hits most of your points, but maybe they don't do a cinema release. So you think, well, I want a cinema release. Since you still have those rights, you could do that independently. You could do all of it independently. If you get no offers that you like, you can also distribute independently. It's definitely more doable nowadays. It's just a lot of work, so to keep that in mind to do it correctly. And you'll need some budget to spend on that. Whereas if you give it to a distributor, they're paying for it, and then your costs are minimal. So keep that in mind. But I would definitely make sure that you meet with enough distributors, show to enough distributors that you have enough offers, that you can see what the range is, and then also talk to them and ask them what their plan is, how they're going about it, similar movies that they've done, and so you can, and then maybe the similar movies, you reach out to that team. If they've done a movie similar to yours, great, like reach out to the director, producer there and see what they did for them. That way you're not going in blind and just trusting that they're going to take care of your movie. At least you have some idea. But even then, like, if you choose someone good, you're still going to have to be on top of it. You have to check in with them. You have to see how you you can help, what you guys can do to like getting cast involved with podcasts, getting them on interviews, whatever it is you can do to add on to the PR and marketing efforts you still want to do no matter what type of distribution you get. And if you're doing it independently, you're handling this all yourself, that's a whole separate video, that's a huge topic. I definitely want to get into that because I think it's super interesting and there's plenty of case studies and examples of people doing it really well. But those are pretty much all the options and everything that you're doing as a producer. So as you can see, as a producer, you're really involved with everything. Which, you know, if you have the personality for that, or this is something that you want to do, it's really rewarding because what the movie turns into is a direct effect of what you decided, starting from what script you chose, to director, to everything. So something really rewarding about really making a movie from beginning to end. But, you know, there's a lot of skills involved. You know, it's a lot of problem solving, a lot of negotiation. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about if you want to be a producer. And if you guys enjoyed the video or you have any questions about producing or anything like that, just leave that in the comments and I'll definitely answer. I appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.